chapter 3, 13 through 20. By way of review, we're an introduction and an interlude and 3 lectures into Proverbs. So we were just in Proverbs 3, 1 through 12, maybe a month ago or so. And in that lecture, the previous lecture, Solomon, the father, invited his son into the covenant. And there were covenant requirements and covenant blessings, if you remember that. And we reflected on the end, sort of the New Testament truth, that none of us would truly fulfill all of the old covenant requirements. But we do receive the new covenant blessings through Jesus fulfilling the old covenant requirements. And so there's comfort and satisfaction in sort of looking down biblical theology and considering what Christ has done in comparison with Proverbs. So as a whole, this book is a book about wisdom, which is the skill of living righteously. We'll see that come out a little bit stronger at the end today. And we see that wisdom is personified as a woman, meaning that Solomon describes an immaterial thing or an idea, wisdom, as something that takes on human characteristics. So he describes wisdom as a lady. And his encouragement is for his son to go pursue this woman, to find her and to embrace her. And this theology continues building and even accumulating at the end of Proverbs in Proverbs 31, where wisdom is described as a human lady as well, a woman who fears the Lord. And so as we spend a little bit of time in today's text, this is an interlude, I think, between lectures 3 and 4. There's a few different ways to divide the remainder of this chapter. It's in 4 pieces. 13 through 18 is our first piece. 19 through 20 is the second piece. And then you have what we'll look at next week, which is the second 2 pieces. There are 4 individual poems. The real question is, how are they intended to be put together? And based on the address here, we'll call this one an interlude in between two of the lectures. And the address is an Adam, right? Happy is the man, rather than hear my son. So it's a little bit more general, it's a bit more broad, and he's applying some of the same principles that he's been specifically addressing his son about to now sort of the general population or to anyone. So it's 2 pieces, and these 2 are connected. They're connected to next week as well, but we see a pretty strong tie between verse 18 and verses 19 and 20. We'll look at that when we get there. So this set of 2 poems, Interlude 2, primarily addresses, so here's kind of the proposition, it addresses the priority and the blessing of spiritual life over physical life. Finding wisdom, which in Proverbs is a co-referential term, a fancy way of saying something close to synonym. The wisdom is close to a synonym with the fear of God, with like the New Testament idea of godliness. It's walking in the way that he desires for us to walk. That idea, spiritual life in its fullness, is better than physical life itself and anything that we could find therein. And then in 19 and 20, he reflects upon the connection of the Lord, Yahweh, to wisdom, primarily in creation, showing us that if we didn't think it had value initially, then see the value that God places upon it and his use of wisdom, which is encouraging and humbling and should prompt a pursuit of it. These are our considerations for this morning, and what we will probably zero in on 14 and 15. These ideas here are where my heart has been led to reflect primarily on this week. So as you look at this, let's just familiarize ourselves a little bit at some of what's happening. You have an inclusio, a beginning and end, with the word happy, and that's the word blessed. In the New Testament, it's makarios. We'll see that in the Sermon on the Mount. We'll talk through that in a moment. But an inclusio. This is a blessed individual, a blessed Adam, a blessed man who what? who finds wisdom, who gains understanding. And that's parallel in verse 18 with taking hold of her and retaining her. So here we have more poetic ties that wisdom, this woman is like understanding, is wisdom, is like knowledge, is like the fear of the Lord, is like godliness. So you have the beginning and end is really about pronouncing this blessing, or acknowledging a blessing that exists on this individual who's successful in the pursuit of wisdom, finds her, and keeps her. So you can see a bit of an advancement between 13 and 18. He finds her, he gains her, but then he takes hold and retains her. So there's a permanence to the relationship that the young man, or the Adam, not just the son, has with wisdom. So then the middle two pieces, which is the B, is we have the reason that this person is blessed. And that is because of the superiority of wisdom to physical things. That's really verses 14 and 15. She's better than silver, better than fine gold, better than rubies, and anything that you desire couldn't be compared to her. So a statement of value, and then evidence toward it. Okay, so what are those things? What's the nature of her superiority? Well, the benefits are specified in verses 16 and 17. Length of days, riches and honor, pleasantness and peace. These are some of her profits, some of the things that she offers. You can see between verses 14 and 15, there's a little bit of parallelism. You have 3 lines describing something, and then a cumulative line that says, all the things you may desire. And then 3 more lines trying to evidence something, and all of her paths are peace. So there's a accumulation in the 4th of both of these sets of 4 lines. Into 19 and 20, you have a lot of directional language. And the connection between 18 and 19 and 20 is this idea of creation. You have the tree of life, which is going to take us back to the garden and forward to new earth. And then you have the Lord by wisdom founding the earth and establishing the heavens. So the idea of creation is kind of what ties these 2 poems together. But then you just notice all of the up-down language in 19 and 20. He's founded the earth, that's down. He's established the heavens, that's up. And then he goes both ways in the next 2 lines. By his knowledge, the depths were broken up, and the clouds dropped down the dew. There's refreshment. You can see all of this like movement, just like your head sort of going everywhere, all over creation, and seeing the wonders of what he's done. Not only that he's made it, but that he sustains it. Those are the main poetic pieces, and sort of explains the colors and circles and underlines and all of this. Happy is the one who's successful. Blessed is the one who finds her. So this text reiterates this strong call to go and to look and to search and to give your whole life. We'll see that even strongly in chapter 4. These ideas are repeated where he says, if you get nothing else, go get one thing, and that is wisdom. So this call to the search. What does it mean that somebody is happy who's successful here? I've kind of wrestled with this throughout kind of growing up years. It's one of those things that you just sort of know what it means, but you don't really know what it means at the same time. Maybe like if you haven't carefully thought through the idea of grace, we were just like, well, grace is like grace. You know, it's good stuff. It's like grace. It's a bit like that. Well, blessed is the one, happy is the one. What do you mean happy? Like I'm just like smiling all the time? No, I actually prefer the translation blessed here, which is a normal translation of it. They're kind of trying to put the nuance of this word into it, which is fair. But it is like joyfully walking through life as this individual. And the tension there is that the individual may not always be experiencing that from a felt emotion standpoint, right? It may not be, this man who's found wisdom may not personally view his life as just this constant high, or like, wow, look at me, it's just wonderful how I found wisdom. But Solomon, the wise person, would look at them and say, they are blessed. They have look at them as an example. And so really what he's after, and this was really helpful for me this week in reading, I feel like I have a little bit more settled understanding of what this means. It's the idea of the psalmist or Solomon, it's primarily in wisdom literature and Psalms, pointing at somebody and saying, look at the good fortune of so-and-so. Look at how blessed that individual is. It's an instructive mechanism. So it's like the teacher in the classroom raising up the paper of so-and-so or the project and saying, look, see what this student did? Like this. Or maybe in an entrepreneur is put forward at some sort of convention, like, look at this business plan and see how it worked and see how they're thriving. Well, that person may be just in the middle of all sorts of craziness in their business life, but yet the pattern is a good pattern. And there is an ultimate or a final word of success or blessing to their life. That's really what he's saying. How fortunate is the individual who is successful in this quest. This is kind of reserved for people who are experiencing life optimally, meaning that, as we'll see in 19 and 20, there's a creative intention that God had for the world. And despite its brokenness, they're still like about as close as you can be to living optimally. They're living in righteousness. They're living in wisdom. Psalm 1 describes it in this way. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He gives a picture then of his life. This is the picture of the blessed individual, the Asher. He says, he's like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf will not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but they're like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. So there's a relational communion with Yahweh and his principles that produces this blessed, like the pointing out that individual and saying, you are blessed, regardless of maybe some felt experiences. Then Psalm 32 says it beautifully as well. Blessed is the man whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. These are spiritual realities, right? These are things that God is accomplishing in people, and Solomon points at that and says, that's better than anything else. That person is truly and magnificently fortunate. God has smiled upon them. They found wisdom. One of the reasons this is so striking is the tension in Proverbs between the loudness and the very visible, evidenced nature of wisdom and the absolutely impossible, hidden, you can't find it nature of wisdom. Both of these are true, right? We've heard that she sits in the city squares and she's crying out to the simple, how long, O simple ones, will you love simplicity? And yet you also see in Proverbs, but very explicitly in Job 28, we looked at this on a Wednesday night, also spend time in Job 28. This is a wonderful sort of description of wisdom. He says, look, people look everywhere for all sorts of valuable things. And he draws in the ideas of verses 14 and 15. Humans are really good at taking what looks like non-valuable things out of the earth, refining them and turning them into magnificent, beautiful, valuable things. We have an eye for value. But you can't see wisdom. Describes it as an impossibility for humanity to find. And even going on this quest, right, like the good son, going on this quest and even asking death, asking the chaotic waters, where's wisdom? Have you seen it? And they say, I don't know. I've heard a little bit about it, but they're not here. Wisdom's not here. And at the end of Job 28, there's this great poetic reveal where he says, yes, man searched everywhere for wisdom and can't find it, but God has completely searched out wisdom. He holds all of it. He knows all of it. The storehouse of wisdom is like sitting in heaven. And whenever he wants, he dispenses it to whomever he wants. But his pattern and his habit is dispensing it to people who are diligently searching. It's not the normative pattern of God, even within his people. It's not the normative pattern of God to just dispense freely wisdom on people who don't care about it. He loves people searching and desiring, looking for his truth and how they should live and pursuing ultimately him. He wants them to fear him and to love him. And ultimately then to trust that we will be wise in the pursuit of Yahweh rather than just viewing wisdom itself as the end. Make sense? Wisdom is the gift. Wisdom is the goodness of God expressed. Wisdom is the fruit of relationship with him. It's not the ultimate end. Relationship with him is. And so, happy is the man who finds wisdom. Again, this idea, it's, I can't remember the term, the Greek word is makarios, and it's what's used in like the Sermon on the Mount. So all of the like blessed is the man is the Greek equivalent of this kind of an idea. So if you read through Sermon on the Mount, it's the same ideas. He's identifying someone as a fortunate individual. Why would you be so fortunate if you found wisdom and gained understanding? Because, here's why. Her proceeds are better than the profits of silver. Her gain is better than fine gold, or better than the profits of fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things you may desire cannot compare with her. So you can see the contrast, and it contrasts two different things in the first verse compared to the second. The first contrast is like the wages of these two things, what they can get you, what wisdom can get you or offer you, her gifts, the length of days and riches and honor and many other things, compared to what money can get you, what all the valuable things of earth could help you to acquire. And so he's really painting like, okay, so put all these things in one pile and put all these other things in another pile, and let's look which one really would benefit us more. It looks like a bit of a selfish comparison. It's a true one too. Like, so evaluate, take a look. What can wisdom profit me? What can money profit me? And then the next two kind of makes it a bit more personal because it says, and she is more precious than the rubies. So now it's not so much contrasting what they give you, but the items themselves, what you possess, what you hold. And that is that Lady Wisdom, this immaterial personification of something that is good and godly, is better than rubies. This is kind of a provocative idea, I think. And it's one that we're very familiar with. It's also something that we're used to wrestling with. Because every, good Christian's going to say, well, yeah, spiritual things are better than physical things. Then would you consider with me the daily walking out this principle? Because a lot of times, our eyes are drawn very constantly back to, by the nature of us being physical people in a physical world with material needs, we're drawn to those things. And so this is a constant correction, a constant resetting of our gaze that needs to occur. I guess I just prompt the question, like, do you believe this is true? And do we live like this is true? So what are the differences here? What are the difference in what these two can produce? Well, consider everything you ever wanted, and then put wisdom on the other side. That's the idea of line 15b. Think about everything you ever wanted in life, and it's sitting there on one side. Whether that's the financial security, certainly present, having a college fund for your kids, buying really nice gifts for other people, no problem covering the cost of any vehicle repairs or even getting new vehicles, buying the house that you really were hoping for, going beyond that, investing, preparing, retiring well, the vacations along the way. Maybe it's wardrobe, having everything you wanted to wear. Maybe it's just hobbies and having every element of the hobby that you're chasing. The nicest quality, all of it. Put it all over there. And from the material standpoint, anything that money could buy, put it on one side. That's enticing. That's something that most of us think about from time to time. And now put on the other side the benefits of wisdom, the ones identified here: length of days, riches, honor, pleasantness, peace. We saw some others in chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. Some of them repeated: favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man, direction on our paths, health to our flesh, strength to our bones, barns filled with plenty, vats overflowing with new wine. Which also sometimes we, as we talked about then, feel like they're not true today. So we're wrestling in the already not yet paradigm. Which one would you choose? Which one does your heart yearn for? Which one do you find yourself contemplating or considering or really thinking about moving towards more often in life? She's better than all of those. Her table is fuller than the other table. Part of the idea that we're supposed to gather here is the fulfillment element, that money could put food on the table, but money doesn't put fellowship around the table or warmth around the table. Money can buy a house, but it doesn't fill that house with life and joy and laughter or family or even comforts. It doesn't do that. Money can buy the jewelry or buy the vehicle, but it doesn't purchase the love that people desire. It doesn't purchase relationship. It doesn't do those things. So wisdom, unlike wealth, is never diminished by use or by disbursement, it's probably a better word, a disbursement to other people. I mean, like money is even lauded in the Psalms and in Proverbs for being like a shield, right? Money can defend you from difficult things. When the bad, something happens to your vehicle, if you have the $2,000 to throw at it, you throw it at it, boom, done, no problem, no big deal. I had the $2,000. But it's also a one-time use only. The shield sort of needs regenerated, needs rebuilt. You got to re-earn another $2,000. That's not the case with wisdom. It always functions in the same way. It stays with you. It's also like if you gave money to somebody, then now they have it and you don't. But that's not the case with wisdom. In fact, Solomon is giving to the next generation something that he maintains, something that he continues to possess. So you see some of the distinctions. And if you lean into those distinctions, you lean into the beauty and the benefit of God's things, his wisdom, the eternal realities, living for tomorrow even more than today, rather than the physical hoard of things. A few other passages of Scripture, right? This is a bit shotgunish, but hang with me. Matthew chapter 13, verses 44 through 46. Jesus says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. So he's referring the kingdom of heaven to a treasure. And if you were able to assure that with this one purchase, you could have the kingdom of heaven or the value of it, then you would sell everything that you have and buy that field. Again, verse 45, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls. It's interesting. Some of you may even have in verse 15 pearls instead of rubies. That word rubies it's uncertain exactly what it means, and eventually the more common translation with pearls. The reason they go for something red, which could be pink like a pearl, but ruby is a little bit like more in your face, is because Jeremiah associates this word as something that's red. So it's something valuable and red. Sometimes you might have coral. I like rubies, but I think it's the strongest English kind of, oh yeah, that's a valuable red thing, but anyways. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all he had, and he bought that one pearl. You think of the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus, nearly righteous, and Jesus addresses an issue in his heart. He says, well, why don't you do what this individual did? Go sell all you have. Give it away. Come follow me. And he went away sorrowful, because in his heart he valued physical, material things to a greater degree than the spiritual wealth. 1 Timothy 4, 6 through 11 gives instruction to shepherds. He says, if you instruct the brethren in these things, you will be a good minister of Jesus Christ, nourished in the words of faith and of the good doctrine which you have carefully followed. 2 verses later. For bodily exercise profits a little. There is value, temporary value. But godliness is profitable for all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come. This is a faithful saying and worthy of acceptance. For to this end we of all men, especially of all those who believe, for to this end we both labor and suffer reproach, because we trust in the living God, who is the Savior of all men, especially of those who believe. These things command and teach. So if these things are truly better, and we believe that they are, Scripture is replete with examples of the fact that they are, and we are of all people truly blessed, we are a share, then ought not our attitudes and our dispositions reflect that reality? Shouldn't we walk through life acknowledging fullness? Shouldn't we be content and grateful people filled with thanksgiving, not this woe is me mentality, not overemphasizing the physical realities or our lack of interaction with them around us? Riches come and riches go. Don't set your heart upon them. The fields of hope in which we sow are harvested in heaven. Because if the world is everything, if the world, song artist that I like says, if the world is all we've got, then all right. But it's not. So he's saying, let's chase that which is good for the soul rather than diamonds and gold. I think we get the point. Encourage you towards continued reflection upon it. So we looked a little bit a month ago, chapter 3, 1 through 12, about some of the nature of these blessings, length of days, right hand, left hand, riches and honor. And you kind of have this image of Lady Wisdom, and she looks kind of like what we would have as like the Lady Justice. You know, she has like scales in one hand, and she's judging this feminine figure who holds out gifts in her hands, and those are based on, a lot of cultures have, even back to ancient Egyptian cultures, have various images and icons of the offerings of this goddess. And she says, here, follow me, and this is what I'll give you. And there's something like that going on here, that Lady Wisdom is portrayed in these strong terms with offerings for anyone who would follow. And we talked through and will continue talking through the already not yet element of these things, like length of days, riches, honor, pleasantness, peace. These are promises, these are assurances, they are yours, and we do have them today. They are material and they are spiritual. But certainly we, as people with one foot in the old world and one foot in the new world, we have to acknowledge the not yet element. That not many believers in this world are rich in material things. There are many that don't live long material lives. There are many that from a material perspective do not have pleasant experiences walking through the world. And that's not in conflict with verses 16 and 17. We're called to view things very explicitly through new eyes, through spiritual eyes. And then he cumulates the idea of blessing by saying, she, wisdom and understanding, this one that you've acquired, she is a tree of life to all of those who take hold of her. And blessed, happy are all who retain her. So for the one who keeps wisdom, you have this connection to an ancient icon of religion, that is the tree of life. And this is something that's very prevalent in the creation narrative. It's something that's very prevalent in the end of all things, in the new earth. You have these two trees in the garden. There's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which they were forbidden from, and the tree of life, which they probably were able to participate in until they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. At that point, there's separation. Or they were removed from the garden, taken away from access to everlasting life. I do believe in part as a mercy of God to prohibit them from eating into condemned immortality. They needed redemption before they eat again of this tree. Not as though the tree itself possesses some magical powers, but that God has created it and designed it with intention. Anything it has, he has given to it. And then you see this picture picked up in Revelation 19 through 22. And in that picture, we have New Jerusalem descending onto new earth. And there in new earth, there's this river that flows from the throne of God. By the river, a tree that bears fruits, 12 fruits, one for each month. And it always is bearing fruit in its season. It's always constantly watered. And this picture is of the generosity and the abundance of new earth. And it's called the tree of life. So you have these Edenic bookends to the whole of Scripture. And Proverbs is the only book that explicitly picks up on this picture. Ezekiel references it once as well, but never says tree of life. It's just described in the same way. But there are a few other things that are called trees of life in Proverbs. There's 4 times. This is the one that's associated with Lady Wisdom. And so it's often the one that's really tied in with the Genesis and Revelation narrative. But other things that are called the trees of life. In chapter 11, verse 30, the mouth of the righteous is called a tree of life. In chapter 13, verse 12, a fulfilled desire is called a tree of life. And then in chapter 15, verse 4, a gentle tongue is called a tree of life. So a gentle tongue or a fulfilled desire, those don't give you immortality, do they? He's really picking up on the symbol, and the symbol is that of refreshment and fullness and always access to nourishment. If you think about what this tree would actually mean in the ancient Near East concept, that there you have food in abundance secured. That was not a given. Our grocery stores thrash this image in our minds because we have it right there, and there, and there, and there, and there, and there. Like we live in this ridiculous abundance. But most people throughout most of history have not lived in this sort of abundance. You don't go to the store, right? The store is in your backyard, and if it doesn't go well, you're in trouble. And if you don't have water, you're in trouble. And if the locusts come, you're in trouble. What are you going to do? Well, you travel to Egypt or you go somewhere else. You have to go and give away yourselves or your life or your money, and you're just trying to make it. You're just trying to live. So imagine to that individual who's just experiencing the curse in their face constantly as they toil and sweat and labor for food. Now there's wisdom is a tree of life, who has 12 fruits in 12 seasons, and it's always there, and it's by the water, this river that's always flowing. That is tremendous. That's a hopeful image right there. And there's the promise too, or the anticipation in this idea of the removal of the curse. That they're not sweating to accomplish the tree. No, they're still working and there's great joy in new earth, but there's not the same sort of toil over the ground in a back-breaking, sweating sort of a way. There's no need. Curse is reversed. So, yeah, in some ways, our grocery stores veil the joys of New Jerusalem compared to the Hebrew mind here. But that's the idea. To live with her, to possess skill in righteousness, to possess the fear of Yahweh, and to walk before him in this way, that holds in it the promise of life eternal. That's where this goes. And that's very hopeful, very encouraging. The idea of creation tied with the tree of life is what brings us to 19 and 20. And if you have any doubts maybe about the benefit of wisdom, what this piece of the study, I think one of the things that this short poem is supposed to do is to show you that God himself uses wisdom, that wisdom was of great value to Yahweh. And that's kind of the crowning proof of wisdom's glory, that it works, that it's valuable, that it's real. It's like, look, God uses wisdom, so we ought to as well. So it's by wisdom, and notice the parallel to verse 13 of wisdom understanding stacked in verse 19. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth, and by understanding he established the heavens. We'll pick up some of these ideas again more and develop them more about wisdom's interaction with God in creation in chapter 8, where there was a big controversy in the early church about what's meant there. So we'll pick that up again. But suffice to say for this morning, like wisdom's there at the beginning of all things. Wisdom's before anything was made. Wisdom attends God when he speaks. And that should give great value to the idea in our hearts. When he's building the house of the world is kind of as the picture here. When he's putting the foundational pieces in play, and then he builds it up to the heavens. When he's speaking all of these things into existence, wisdom is like the veil through which all of this goes. It's the lens through which you could see everything that he's doing. The third parallel there is knowledge, wisdom, understanding, knowledge. By his knowledge, the depths are broken up and clouds drop down the dew. So not only did he establish it and make it in verse 19, he fills it and sustains it in verse 20. And there's a lot of water imagery in 20. Water beneath and water above. And so the water beneath is like the chaotic depths, and the deep that he carefully peels apart, like the crust of the earth, so that this ancient abyss or the great chaos can like just come through in the right way. And he says, okay, right there's your line, stop right there. And he benefits the earth by controlling this watery substance. And then, not only is there benefit below, but there's benefit from above. Clouds drop down the dew. And so here you have something that, again, we don't incredibly appreciate, because we might just go to rain, right? In the West, we're just thinking about like, well, yeah, it rains. And that's true and great for us, but it doesn't rain so much in Israel. It doesn't rain nearly as much as here. And this idea of dew was one of the greatest benefits. It's the west wind that comes after sunset, and it brings moisture with it from the sea, and it rests upon the grass. And so in Canaan, to have a nearly rainless summer, they're dependent upon the moisture from the dew. And so he's saying, in every way, I'm controlling and sustaining my creation. We saw that very clearly when we went through Genesis 2. That's one of the main poetic points of the creation account, is that he builds structure on the first 3 days, and then he fills all of those pieces on the days 4, 5, and 6. And so observe and consider the great complexities of creation. It's like when God appears to Job again, he's like, who are you? Why don't you stand up and I have some questions for you. I want to ask you about my world and see how much you know. I mean, homeschool moms are probably leading the way, but after that, the rest of us are like, there's a lot we don't know about the created world. There's so many things, so many intricacies, so many things that he's accomplishing and doing and sustaining that we aren't even aware of. Ever, always, kindly, graciously, providentially doing this for us and for his glory. And again, the lens through which he did it is wisdom, which should teach us that if we want to live in his world well, if we want to live in God's world God's way, we have to understand wisdom. That's the key. It kind of unlocks the door into seeing things Yahweh's way. So it's important. Wisdom's role in creation should motivate our search. After all, as one commentator said, if one wants to know how the world works and thus benefit from recognizing the rhythms of creation, what better way to do that than to share in the wisdom that was there when the world began? So as we consider these kind of two pieces, we always want to, as a New Testament assembly, reflect upon Christ's role in all of this. And quite simply, from verses 14 and 15, the reflection in my heart this week has been this. It's the contrast of the life of faith compared to the life of sight, which is what we're called to do. And Jesus explained this even with the people that saw him, right? He explained it to his disciples. And he had a kind of a moving moment with Thomas after his resurrection. And Thomas wants to see. Thomas wants to put his hand on the side. And he says, I'm not going to believe unless I see it. And Jesus very gently and kindly allows that and permits that and comforts Thomas with faith or with sight. But then he says, Makarios, blessed, Asher, happy, are those who haven't seen and yet have believed. And that's us. That's our call, is to walk with belief. Even that Proverbs 3, 13 through 20, that wisdom's better than stuff. And to order our life appropriately in that way. To not spend more time chasing other things than chasing wisdom. To have a priority that's significant in our lives. It's visibly evident in our lives that we love that. We love him. We love his stuff more than we love the stuff of the world. And then to reflect in verses 19 and 20 upon the impact of the reality that wisdom was there at the beginning. That it's by wisdom he made everything. That should teach us its significance. And to cause us to sort of pause and yearn and look and pray again and do the Job 28, like go with like desperation and with humility to him and say, please, more wisdom, fill me, show me, direct me, guide me, so that we would hear his voice through her. So I hope that this is an encouraging text to you this morning as we continue to walk in our life of Christ. Let's pray.